Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Tom Banchoff. I serve as Vice President for Global Engagement here at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. I'm really delighted to welcome you to the first of our 4 short lectures that make up the Global Citizenship Module. The module is a set of lectures, readings, and other resources that are being incorporated into different courses simultaneously around the world. Now, like you all, hundreds of students and faculty exploring global citizenship together. Like you, I'm at a Jesuit institution, one of almost 200 Catholic and Jesuit colleges and universities around the world. Together, we're part of a network that expands across space, as you can see here, but also across time. The Society of Jesus, as the order of Jesuit priests is known, goes back almost 500 years to the middle of the 16th century. Jesuit schools like your university and mine are part of the oldest and most extensive higher education network in the world, all joined together within the International Association of Jesuit Universities. While our institutions are very different, we share many of the same values that relate directly to the practice of citizenship. Core Jesuit values include a commitment to human dignity and equality, to solidarity with the poor and marginalized, to care for the environment, our common home, to interreligious and intercultural dialogue, and to service to the common good. When we commit to these values, when we live them out, the idea of citizenship becomes more than just formal membership in a national community with certain rights and obligations. Citizenship becomes a responsibility, a calling to build more just societies in which these positive values, from dignity and solidarity to the common good, can truly come alive. Now, you've probably heard the Jesuit motto, "Women and Men for Others," our commitment to educating people who serve others. That's a great definition of citizenship in action, of working to build communities that are inclusive and just, in which everyone can fulfill their potential. But there's a problem that we're going to explore together in this lecture. Until now, we've been talking about citizenship in a country, national citizenship. But what is global citizenship? I'm an American citizen, you may be Indian or Brazilian, name the country. We get what it means to be a national citizen, but what does it mean to be a global citizen? What is global citizenship? That's the topic of this first lecture, and let me assure you, there is no clear answer. We'll first develop a working definition of global citizenship, and then explore some problems it poses. Then emphasize the importance of global imagination and global awareness in addressing those problems, before turning to some historical examples of global citizenship in action. I'm going to lay out just one possible definition as a way to get you thinking about your own ideas about global citizenship, ideas you can explore and develop through your own reflection, through classroom discussion in your home institution, but also, and this is really one of the coolest things about this project, in Zoom dialogues with students across the Jesuit network in other parts of the world. So here's that working definition, just to get our conversations moving. To be a global citizen is to see ourselves as members of a community that includes all of humanity, to see the basic dignity and equality of all people, whatever their differences, as a central value, as well as care for the earth, our common home, and to act on that vision in practice, to seek as best we can to advance the global common good. What do you think? There are 2 problems with such an understanding of global citizenship, and perhaps they've already occurred to you. Let's call them the personal and the practical. At a personal level, look at your own lives. You're busy with friends, family, studies, hobbies, and work. It's difficult enough to find time to be an active citizen locally or nationally. Is global citizenship really a practical option? To put it another way, who has time to care about what's happening halfway around the world? Don't we have problems enough to deal with right at home? That's the personal problem with global citizenship. We don't have the time or energy for it. But there's a practical problem as well. What power do I really have to make a difference? The world is in bad shape, divided along national, religious, class, ethnic, racial, and other lines. War, inequality, pandemics, the problems are way over our heads. Political elites hold so much power, our political, military, business, and other leaders. They won't listen to me. If I can't make a practical difference, why should I even try? That's the practical problem with global citizenship. We're just too powerless to make a positive difference. So should we give up on it? Should we give up on global citizenship? I don't think so. But we need to address these very real personal and practical problems with the idea. One way to do so is to try to cultivate two things: global imagination and global awareness. That's the second point I want to address in this lecture. Through imagination, it is possible to change our personal mindset, to lift our horizons from the local and the immediate to the global and universal. But imagination is not enough. We also need greater global awareness, an understanding of how globalization is both drawing us together and pulling us apart, an understanding of how we fit into global forces, and how we can make a positive difference in the world, especially when we act together. So global imagination and global awareness. Let's first take a closer look at global imagination. People everywhere throughout history have been most concerned with their personal and local circumstances. We're no different today. But over the centuries, some creative thinkers have imagined a bigger horizon, a global frame of reference encompassing all humanity. Let me give you just 3 examples of influential sets of ideas: cosmopolitanism, Confucianism, and monotheism. First, let's look at the ancient Mediterranean and at cosmopolitanism and its view of a universal community of rational human beings. You've probably heard the word cosmopolitan. It's ancient Greek for citizen of the world. More than 2,000 years ago, some prominent Greek and Roman thinkers were already thinking globally, imagining all human beings, wherever they are, as part of one community, a shared humanity. Like we do today, they knew all too well the emotional pull of particular local attachments. But they also insisted on our common humanity grounded in our powers of reason, our ability to reflect on and to be inspired by ideas about what is true and good and beautiful. They saw rationality, our powers of reason, as what is common to human beings, as what binds us together as citizens of the world. Now let's look to East Asia and at Confucianism, with its emphasis on empathy as a marker of our common humanity. Halfway around the world in China, around the same time, the philosopher Confucius and his followers imagined our common humanity in another way, placing less emphasis on reason and more emphasis on emotion, our capacity for empathy with others. In the Confucian tradition, the virtue of Ren, spelled R-E-N, can be translated as humanity, humaneness, goodness, or love. Ren is a virtue to be cultivated over the course of a lifetime in relationship with others. It helps us to see our happiness and purpose in life as connected with that of a wider human community. For a third example, let's look to Western Asia and the Near East, and at another ancient tradition, monotheism, with its emphasis on the common origins of global humanity. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, whatever their differences, all share the view that we human beings were created by one God, possess an equal dignity, and should treat one another with respect, wherever and whoever we are. In the Christian tradition, the parable of the Good Samaritan makes this point in a memorable way. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is speaking to the crowd, reminding them of the divine commandment to love your neighbor. When someone asks him, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus answers with a story, the story of a man who was robbed, beaten, and left to die by the side of the road. The man is eventually saved not by the locals who walk past without helping, but by a foreigner from Samaria, the Good Samaritan. Jesus' point is clear. We should treat everyone as a neighbor. The parable is a call to stretch our imaginations, to broaden our conception of our humanity beyond our personal, familiar circumstances, to encompass everyone. We are, as Pope Francis has put it, all brothers and sisters, citizens of our respective nations and of the entire world. For other examples of influential efforts to imagine global humanity as our frame of reference, be sure to consult the readings for this lecture, which include wonderful passages from Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and the Dalai Lama. Of course, imagining ourselves as connected with foreigners, as respectful of them, even responsible for them, can be difficult. Many of us live in materialist and individualist consumer cultures in which we are encouraged to put our interests first. We often tend to think of strangers not as brothers and sisters, but as outsiders, as competitors, even as threats, as people of no concern to us. Unless we can imagine ourselves as part of a wider humanity, drawing on the world's philosophical, religious, and cultural traditions, or on our own independent reflection, it is very difficult to see beyond our personal worlds with all their very real demands and conceive ourselves as global citizens. So that's the personal dimension. Now let's turn to the practical problem that we are too powerless to have any impact as global citizens, and maybe therefore we should not even try. Here I want to suggest that greater global awareness can make a difference. Let's look at our current global era and at its historical origins. Look around. Today we live in a globalized world drawn closer together through revolutions in communications and transportation technology. We are interdependent, shaped by global processes, economic, cultural, and political, that impact our lives. Those processes constrain us and our choices in so many ways, but they also open up paths for us to make a difference. An awareness of global interdependence can be traced back to the European expansion that started in the 16th and 17th centuries and gradually brought the Americas, Asia, and Africa into an integrated world system. With globalization, global citizenship became a practical goal for the first time, a world in which the dignity and basic equality of every human being might be recognized and protected, regardless of national, religious, racial, or other differences. Of course, we know that's not what happened. The last 500 years have not seen a flourishing of the idea of global citizenship. Instead, the dominant trend has been imperialism, exploitation, enslavement, and war. The European powers, and later the United States, tended to pursue economic and military interests at the expense of the peoples they encountered. Violent conflict too often overshadowed peaceful cooperation in world affairs, right up through the two world wars in the 20th century, and in many respects, right up to today. Now, before we turn to today, how globalization matters for us, that's the topic of the next 3 lectures. Let's briefly explore a few positive examples of global citizenship in these earlier historical eras. 3 examples of people working together across borders to advance human dignity and equality in previous centuries: the anti-slavery movement, the women's movement, and the anti-colonial movement. First, the anti-slavery movement. The period from the 16th into the 19th century saw the enslavement of tens of millions of human beings, mainly Black Africans. Over time, this violent suppression of human dignity and equality spawned a political reaction, including both rebellions of the enslaved and the political mobilization of anti-slavery forces. Transatlantic networks of abolitionists, those opposed to slavery, including progressive religious leaders, social activists, and freed enslaved persons, successfully pushed for an end to the slave trade and the practice of slavery in Europe, the United States, and across colonial empires. By the early 20th century, racial equality had become an increasingly acceptable principle around the world, even if its practice remains far from universal today, a century later, as racism is still a deeply entrenched reality. A second example of people working together on an international scale for human dignity and equality is the women's movement. The political and economic subjugation of women has ancient roots in traditional male-dominated patriarchal societies. The pattern persisted in different ways through industrial revolutions and the first democratic revolutions in Europe and the Americas. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, national and transnational networks of activists pushed successfully for greater women's equality, including an improvement of working conditions and, most centrally, the right to vote. It has taken centuries of activism within and across countries to expand the idea and practice of global citizenship for women, half the human race. And as in the case of racial equality, there is still much to be done to secure equality in practice. A third example is the anti-colonial movement. Resistance to European colonialism can be traced back to its very beginnings, but only after the colonial empires were weakened by 2 world wars did national liberation movements gain the momentum necessary to bring traditional colonial domination to an end in most parts of the world. Over the course of the 20th century, transnational movements of intellectuals and activists encouraged and responded to popular uprisings that ultimately helped to bring about new, independent nation-states with the right to participate in the international community. While most former colonies lack the wealth and influence of their former colonizers, and some patterns of imperial domination still persist, anti-colonial movements have had tremendous positive historical impact in advancing equality and national self-determination in world affairs. The struggle for racial equality, gender equality, and national self-determination goes back many decades and continues to this day. A historical awareness of processes of globalization, of the weaving together of the world over past centuries, provides examples of how human lives have been impacted by global processes, and of how people have been able, through resistance and cooperation, to act as global citizens in efforts to build a more just and equal world. Now, in this lecture, we've come up with a working definition of global citizenship, explored 2 potential problems with it, that it's far removed from our personal lives and not at all practical, and proposed ways forward through global imagination and global awareness, imagining ourselves as part of a wider human family and becoming more aware of the globalization processes that make us so interdependent. We've concluded with some historical examples of global citizenship in action that can inspire us going forward. In our next lecture, the second one in this series, we'll explore how global citizenship matters today.